I'm 74 years old. I stopped going out, and it changed my life forever. What I discovered in that silence was not loneliness, but a truth I never expected. I thought staying inside would end my life slowly, day by day. But instead it opened doors inside my heart I had ignored for decades. This is the story of how losing the outside world helped me find my inner world again, and how everything I believed about life, people, and happiness completely changed. The day I decided to stop going out was not planned, nor was it dramatic. It happened slowly, like a fading light I did not notice until everything around me became quieter than I remembered. At 74, my body no longer listened to me the way it once did, and my friends had already drifted away into their own lives and routines. I would sit near the window every morning, watching people pass by, carrying their days like they had purpose stitched into every step. I started telling myself that the outside world was no longer for me. The roads felt longer than they used to be, and even the sound of children laughing outside felt like a memory I could not touch anymore. One evening I realized I had not stepped outside for days, then weeks, and finally months. The silence in my home was not peaceful anymore. It was heavy, like it was holding secrets I was too tired to uncover. I stopped expecting visitors, stopped answering calls quickly, and slowly the world outside my door became something I only remembered in fragments. But what I did not realize then was that this silence was not the end. It was the beginning of something I had never prepared for in my entire life. The first few days after I fully accepted my isolation felt strange, as if time itself had slowed down just for me. I would wake up and sit in the same chair for hours, not because I was comfortable, but because I did not know what else to do with a life that suddenly had no appointments, no conversations, and no urgency. I began noticing small things I had ignored for years, like the way sunlight moved across my floor or how dust floated in the air like quiet thoughts waiting to be noticed. At first I thought I was losing myself, but slowly I realized I was meeting myself again, in a version I had forgotten existed. I had spent so many years rushing that I never learned how to simply be still, and now stillness was all I had. But something inside me was slowly beginning to heal without me noticing it. The loneliness did not arrive like a storm, but like a quiet guest who slowly decided to stay longer than expected. I would often sit with my memories, replaying conversations from years ago as if they were old films. I could not stop watching. My children called less frequently, not out of neglect, but because their lives were full in ways mine no longer was. I told myself I was fine, that independence at my age was natural, but deep inside I felt a crack forming in the walls I had built around my heart. One evening I tried to step outside just to feel the air, but my legs hesitated at the door as if they had forgotten how to move beyond the safety of my room. That moment frightened me more than I cared to admit. I realized I was not just avoiding the outside world. I was slowly losing confidence in it. The streets I once walked with ease now felt unfamiliar, like paths belonging to someone else's life. Still, I told myself that peace could be found inside these four walls, even if that peace felt more like silence than comfort. I began reading old books again, books that once inspired me but now felt like echoes of a younger self I could barely recognize. Yet in those pages I found something surprising, a reminder that life always continues, even when we stop moving with it. The realization did not come all at once, but in small waves that slowly changed the way I saw everything around me. I started noticing how quiet mornings could feel less empty when I allowed myself to listen instead of resist them. Sometimes I would sit by the window and watch the world move forward without me, and instead of feeling left behind, I began feeling like I was finally observing life rather than fighting it. There was a strange comfort in that shift, as if I had stopped running long enough to notice where I actually stood in the journey of my own existence. I did not know then that this quiet observation was the beginning of a deeper understanding I had long ignored in my life. And even though I was alone, I started feeling less abandoned and more aware of myself than ever before. The silence was no longer my enemy, it was becoming my teacher. One morning I woke up with an unusual feeling, as if something inside me had shifted during the night. The heaviness that once filled my chest felt slightly lighter, and for the first time in a long while, I did not immediately reach for regret or sadness when I looked at my quiet room. Instead, I felt curiosity, a gentle question, forming in my mind about what else life might still offer me at this stage. I decided to try something small, something I had avoided for months. I opened the door and stepped outside just for a moment. The air touched my face like a forgotten memory, and I stood still not knowing whether to step forward or return inside. For a brief moment I felt like a stranger in the world I had once known so well. But instead of fear, there was something softer, a quiet invitation to try again. I took one slow step down the path, then another, listening to the sound of my own footsteps, as if they belonged to someone I was just beginning to meet. As I walked further, I noticed how the world had not changed as much as I had assumed. It was I who had changed within it. The trees still swayed in the wind, the birds still called out to each other, and life still moved forward with quiet certainty. I began to understand that I had not lost the world. I had simply stepped away from it for too long. That realization brought a strange mix of sadness and relief inside me. Sadness for the time I had lost, and relief for the time I still had left. I slowly began walking further each day, not far, just enough to remind myself that I was still part of something larger than my own silence. Sometimes I would sit on a bench and watch people pass by, noticing their hurried steps, their conversations, their laughter, all things I once took for granted. I realized that life was never truly gone from me. I had simply stopped participating in its rhythm, and slowly I began to feel the rhythm again inside my own heart, as if it had been waiting patiently for me to return all along. The journey back to myself was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet and steady, like dawn, breaking after a long night. One of the most unexpected things I discovered during this time was that silence does not always mean emptiness. Sometimes it means space. Space for thoughts to settle and for emotions to finally speak without interruption. I began to reflect on my life with a clarity I had never experienced before. I thought about the years, I spent chasing responsibilities without ever pausing to ask myself, what truly made me feel alive? I thought about the people I loved and the moments I let slip away because I was too busy to notice their value. There were days when regret would quietly enter my thoughts, but instead of pushing it away, I allowed myself to sit with it, to understand it, and slowly to forgive myself for not knowing than what I know now. That forgiveness did not come easily, but it came honestly, like rain after a long drought. I also started writing small notes about my days, not for anyone else, but for myself, as if I was learning to speak to my own soul again. Each word I wrote felt like a small recovery of something I thought I had lost forever. My days became less about doing and more about noticing how light changed throughout the day, how sounds carried different meanings depending on my mood, how even silence had different layers if I paid attention long enough. I began to understand that healing does not always look like recovery in the way people expect. Sometimes it looks like sitting quietly with yourself long enough to stop running from your own thoughts. I no longer feared the days I spent alone, because in that aloneness I found a strange kind of companionship within myself. I realized I was not broken, I was simply rebuilding in a quieter way than before. The world outside did not rush to meet me, but it also did not leave me behind. It waited patiently, as if it knew I would return when I was ready. And slowly I stopped measuring my life by how much I did and started understanding it by how deeply I felt it instead. In that shift, I finally began to see beauty in simply being alive without needing to prove it to anyone, including myself, and that realization changed everything I thought I knew about aging life and peace itself forever and gently within. The greatest lesson I learned in these years of solitude is that life does not lose its meaning when we slow down. It reveals meanings we were too busy to notice before. I once believed that stopping meant fading away, but now I understand that stopping can also mean finally seeing clearly. My days are not filled with noise anymore, but they are filled with awareness, and in that awareness I have found a peace I never thought possible at this age. I no longer measure happiness by how many people I see or how many places I visit, but by how calm my heart feels when I sit alone and simply exist. There is a quiet strength in that existence, a strength I wish I had understood earlier in life. If you are someone who feels like life is slowing down too much, or like the world is moving on without you, I want you to know that there is still beauty waiting in the quiet moments. You do not have to rush to keep up with anyone or anything. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply pause and let life meet you where you are. My journey taught me that even in silence, life continues to speak in ways we often ignore. The wind carries messages, the light carries warmth, and the heart carries memories that never truly fade. I am still learning, still growing, still discovering new ways to be present in this world I once stepped away from. And now I understand that stopping going out did not end my life. It transformed it into something quieter and more meaningful than I ever imagined. I no longer fear aging because I have learned that every stage of life has its own kind of light. Before I end this story, I want to remind you that your journey is never too late to change direction. Even in stillness, even in silence, life is still unfolding for you. If this story touched your heart, please remember to share it with someone who might need hope today. Subscribe for more emotional stories, and like this video to support the journey of storytelling that connects us all in our quiet, human experiences. Thank you for being here and listening to this life-changing reflection of mine. May you find peace in your own quiet moments, always, forever.